Hello everyone. Our today's topic is intercostal space, lecture number 2. Intercostal space, lecture number 2. In this lecture, I will take about the intercostal nerve. About the intercostal nerve. You know that from the spinal cord, 31 pair of spinal nerves are arise. 31 pair of the spinal nerves are arise, and this spinal nerve on the right side 31, left side 31. These 31 spinal nerves, they are divided into 5 groups. 8 cervical nerve, 12 thoracic nerve, 5 lumbar nerve, 5 sacral nerve, and 1 coccygeal nerve. Again, cervical 5, thoracic 12, lumbar 5, sacral 5, and coccygeal nerve. Each spinal nerve is divided into the 2 rami, anterior primary ramus and posterior primary ramus. Anterior primary ramus and posterior primary ramus. Anterior primary ramus of upper 11 thoracic nerve. Anterior primary ramus of upper 11 thoracic nerve, they are called intercostal nerve. They are called intercostal nerve. And anterior primary ramus of the 12 thoracic nerve, it is called subcostal nerve, because this nerve is running below the last rib. So intercostal nerve means anterior primary rami of upper 11 thoracic nerve. Now for intercostal nerve, see this diagram. This is the transverse section through the intercostal space. Through the intercostal space. Now, in this diagram, this is the thoracic vertebrae and this is the sternum. Means this is the posterior, this is the anterior. Part of thoracic vertebrae, this is the body of thoracic vertebrae. These are the two transverse process of the vertebrae, and this is the spinous process of vertebrae. And between and here there is an opening is there, and this opening, it is called vertebral foramen, and vertebral foramen contain the spinal cord. Contain the spinal cord, and spinal cord give origin to the spinal nerve by means of 2 roots, anterior root and posterior root. Now see this diagram, transverse section of intercostal space. The outer is the external intercostal muscle. The external intercostal muscle start at the tubercle of the rib and extend up to costochondral junction. At the costochondral junction, it is replaced by external intercostal membrane, which extending from costochondral junction up to the lateral margin of sternum. Deep to the external intercostal muscle, there is an internal intercostal muscle. Internal intercostal muscle is this one. It is start at the lateral margin of sternum and extend up to the angle of the rib. And at the angle of the rib, it is replaced by internal intercostal membrane, and internal intercostal membrane, it extends up to the tubercle of the rib. Up to the tubercle of the rib. Now deep to the internal intercostal muscle, this is the intercostally intimae muscle. Intercostally intimae muscle, and intercostally intimae muscle, it is present only into the middle 2/4 of the space. This is the sternocostalis muscle, because this is the section of upper space. This is the sternocostalis muscle. Now superficial to sternocostalis muscle, this is the internal thoracic artery or internal memory artery with its accompanying vein. Internal thoracic artery running vertically on the side of the sternum. Running vertically on the side of sternum. So this is the internal thoracic artery with its accompanying vein is there. And deep to intercostally intimae and sternocostalis muscle, this is the covering of the lung, and the covering of the lung is called pleura, and pleura having a 2 layer, inner layer and outer layer. So this is the outer layer of the pleura. It is called parietal pleura. One more point, see this is sternocostal muscle and intercostal intimae muscle, they are connected with one another by means of this fascia. So this is the external intercostal muscle and this is external intercostal membrane. This is the internal intercostal muscle and this is the internal intercostal membrane. This is the intercostal intimae muscle, this is the sternocostal muscle and this is the fascia connecting the intercostal intimae with sternocostal. And this is the outer layer covering of lung, that is called parietal pleura. Now here, see here in front of the vertebral thoracic vertebrae, this is the sympathetic ganglion. Sympathetic trunk, they are extended throughout, it is a part of the autonomic nervous system and they are running in front of the vertebral column from its beginning up to the end. And on each sympathetic trunk, the thickenings are there and these thickenings are called sympathetic ganglia. So this thickening is the sympathetic ganglion. Now here anteriorly, this is the section of pectoral lesion. So in front of the external intercostal membrane, this is the pectoralis major muscle. In front of, anterior to it, this is the pectoral fascia or deep fascia of pectoral region. Now the green color one is intercostal nerve. Intercostal nerve, it arises from spinal cord which is situated in the vertebral foramen by means of two roots, anterior root and posterior root. Both roots unite to form the spinal nerve. And spinal nerve divide into the two branches. This is the posterior primary ramus and this is the anterior primary ramus. So posterior primary ramus, it passes backward, pierces the internal intercostal membrane, external intercostal muscle of the back of the thorax and divide and become cutaneous nerve, and this cutaneous nerve is known as the medial cutaneous, posterior cutaneous nerve of the posterior cutaneous nerve, which divide into the medial and lateral branches. Anterior primary ramus of thoracic nerve, it is called intercostal nerve. It is called intercostal nerve. This intercostal nerve, near its beginning, it gives one branch to the sympathetic ganglion. And this branch, it is called white ramus communicans. This branch is called white ramus communicans. Ganglion gives the one branch to the intercostal nerve and this branch is called grey ramus communicans. So white ramus communicans is given by nerve to the ganglion and grey ramus communicans is given by ganglion to the nerve. Here the grey ramus is proximal and white ramus is distal. Then nerve is enter running into the intercostal space. In the intercostal groove, it is running in the intercostal groove. In the intercostal groove, intercostal nerve is happening. It is accompanying with the intercostal artery and vein. I told you last time that this structure they are running one below the other. Intercostal vein is above, intercostal artery is below it, and intercostal nerve is below it. So they are running. Relation is one VAN. So when the nerve is running in the intercostal groove, at that time first it's lying between the pleura and the internal intercostal membrane. Then now in major part of the course, now is running between the internal intercostal muscle and internal intercostal intimae muscle. So major part is running between the internal intercostal and the intercostal intimae muscle. Then now is running between the intercostal muscle and the fascia which connect the intercostal intimae and sternocostal muscle. Then now is going forward, it crosses the internal thoracic fascias and near the side of sternum, it passes forward. First it pierces the internal intercostal muscle, then it pierces the external intercostal membrane, then it pierces the pectoralis major muscle, then it pierces the pectoral fascia and became cutaneous nerve. And this cutaneous nerve, it is known as the anterior cutaneous nerve. And in anterior cutaneous nerve, we divide into the medial and lateral branches, and these branches, they supply the skin of the front of the chest. Again, the course of intercostal nerve, near its beginning, it gives the white ramus communicants to the sympathetic ganglion and receive the grey ramus communication from the ganglion. First, now enter in the intercostal space where it running in the costal groove with relation of one vein, artery and nerve. In the groove, the nerve is lying first between the pleura and internal intercostal membrane. A major part of the course, it is lying between the internal intercostal muscle and intercostal intimae muscle. Then now it is lying between the internal intercostal muscle and fascia covering the intercostal intimae and sternocostalis. Then now cross the internal thoracic vessel and passes forward. Pierce the internal intercostal muscle, external intercostal membrane, pectoralis major, pectoral fascia or deep fascia, and then it became cutaneous nerve, that is called anterior cutaneous nerve. We divide into the medial and lateral branches which supply the skin of the front of the chest. Now branches of the nerve. First branch of the nerve is right ramus communicans to the sympathetic ganglion. In its course, now it gives the branches to the muscle of intercostal space, and these branches are called muscular branches. When the nerve is reached near the angle of the rib, at that time it gives the branch, and this branch is called lateral cutaneous nerve. This branch is called lateral cutaneous nerve. Lateral cutaneous nerve first running along with the intercostal nerve to reach up to the lateral side of thorax. At the lateral side of thorax, lateral cutaneous nerve, it passes laterally, pierce the internal intercostal muscle, external intercostal muscle, and became cutaneous nerve. And this cutaneous nerve, it is known as the lateral cutaneous nerve, which divide into the anterior branches and posterior branch, which supply the skin of the lateral side of thorax. Which supply, and it anteriorly, a terminal end, it continues as the anterior cutaneous nerve, which divide into the medial and lateral branches to supply the skin of the front of the thorax. Now, in addition to these branches, the intercostal nerve gives the one more branch. This is not seen in this section, and this branch is called collateral branch. This branch is called collateral branch. Now, for collateral branch, see this diagram. You are familiar with this figure. These are the two thoracic vertebrae. This is the sternum. This is the intercostal nerve. Near the angle, intercostal nerve give one branch, and this branch is called collateral branch. Collateral branch running in the lower part of intercostal space up to costochondral junction. Up to costochondral junction, and at the costochondral junction it rejoined with the intercostal nerve. So this collateral branch, in its course, it supplies the intercostal muscles as well as the parietal pleura, So total branches of the intercostal nerve is white ramus communicans, muscular branches to the intercostal muscles, lateral cutaneous branch, anterior cutaneous branch, and the collateral branch. Now, first, what is the intercostal nerve? You know, the intercostal nerve is the anterior primary ramus of thoracic nerve. Anterior primary ramus of first thoracic nerve. It divides into two branches. One branch of first intercostal nerve, anterior primary ramus of thoracic nerve, it divides into two branches. one branch joined with the cervical 8 nerve, two from lower trunk of brachial plexus. And this lower trunk of brachial plexus supply the upper limb. It means that anterior primary ramus of first thoracic nerve supply the thorax as well as the upper limb. And that is why first thoracic nerve is called atypical nerve. Similarly, second and third intercostal nerve give the lateral cutaneous branch. This lateral cutaneous branch, they supply the floor of axilla and upper part of medial side of the arm. It means that, and this branch is supplied by second and third intercostal nerve. They are called intercostal brachial artery. Intercostal brachial artery. An intercostal brachial nerve. It is called intercostal brachial nerve. It means that second and third nerve, it is also supply the thorax as well as the upper limb. So this nerve, they are called atypical nerve. Fifth, sixth and seventh intercostal nerve, they supply only to the thorax. They don't supply any other part of the body. And that is why fourth, fifth and sixth intercostal nerve, they are called typical intercostal nerve. Now lower from 7 to 11, lower 5 intercostal nerve, they are running in the intercostal space up to anteriorly. And from anteriorly, it is this 7 to 11 nerve, they are passes downward and reach in the anterior wall of abdomen. Means 7 to 11 nerve, they supply the thorax as well as the abdomen, so they are called atypical nerve. So total typical nerve, they are only 3 in number, 4, 5 and 6. So intercostal space which contain the typical intercostal nerve, they are called typical intercostal space. So I told you about the whole description. It is only applicable, completely applicable to the 4th, 5th and 6th intercostal space because they are the typical intercostal space. Now applied anatomy of the intercostal nerve. The fracture of the rib or fibrosis of intercostal muscle or herpes zoster disease, fracture of the muscle, fracture of the rib, fibrosis of the muscle, intercostal muscle, or the herpes zoster disease, there is irritation occur in the intercostal nerve. And due to this irritation, the patient develops the pain in front of thorax and abdomen, and this pain, it is called root pain. This pain is called root pain. Now second, suppose if the pus is formed in the vertebral column. So this pus of the vertebral column may follow the spinal nerve. From the spinal nerve, the pus may follow with the posterior cutaneous nerve and point out on the back of the thorax. Or it may follow along with the intercostal nerve, follow the lateral cutaneous nerve and point out on the lateral side of thorax. Or pus may follow the anterior cutaneous nerve and point out on the front of thorax. Now today's topic is over